In addition to the standard full-size 17-round magazine that SIG Sauer ships with all of its full-size 9mm P320s and its carry P320s, SIG's now made another offering available, which is this lovely 21-round extended magazine. This is actually a really great length and really great capacity. Not only does it give you 4 more rounds in a factory magazine that has a nice factory good high-powered spring and follower, but also for people who play USPSA or USPSA Limited or who play 3-gun, it's actually very conveniently set up to be just exactly 140 millimeters in length. Actually, it's 141.25 millimeters in length, which, for those of you who don't know, that is the very maximum length allowable for USPSA and 3-gun in the limited or TAC ops types divisions. So really the length is set up just precisely to work for 3-gun and nothing more, with one exception. That's this little gap that you have down here. Now, Springer Precision is doing something to fix that gap and actually add a little bit more capacity even to these 21-round magazines while staying in this legal limit. I'll say real quick, the base pads that come from the factory on these, if you look at the tube themselves, the actual tube extends all the way down. So this is just a base pad that has this this filler, or whatever you want to call it. I don't want to call it a base pad. Basically, it's designed so when you have a stock factory grip frame module, that it will come in and just fill all the gaps in that. The one challenge with that, and that's if you have a gun that you've adapted for a magazine well, then it actually will not lock in because it has the wings, just like a regular factory magazine would not lock in if it has those wings. So a couple of ways to get around that. One is if you take a standard P320 base pad like this one that actually came off a 17-round magazine and put that on a 21-round magazine, then of course at that point they'll lock in just fine and you can use them with no issues and with still the factory spring, the factory follower, everything else like that. You could also modify this one. Again, you could cut down that base pad if you wanted to on the front, or just anything to cut down the wing so it would then fit. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's actually not a bad looking base pad. It's just, again, with the wings, it just won't work in most of the guns if you've modified them to put a magwell on. If you haven't, then it should work just fine. But, so Springer Precision sent me a nice little package. And I have some new Bevan Graham's springs and followers in here. In these ones, there was an earlier version of Graham's springs and followers that was being used for some of the P320s that was based on, I believe it was the XDM. That worked sort of. The follower went in, it fed the magazines. The last round was a little bit weak, wasn't really catching on very well, and then there wasn't enough material to lock the slide back. That's not these. These are actually designed specifically for the SIG Sauer P320, and Bevan did a really, really good job with making it. So not only will they feed everything, including the last round, very, very well, but also they should lock back on the last round. So I haven't tried this finished product yet. I have some that I've modified previously. We will give that a shot right now and see how we can install some of these little guys. Which are the new Springer Precision extensions. They're designed specifically for these 21-round factory mag tubes that, on paper anyway, shouldn't put us past that 141.25 millimeter length that's required by USPSA. Now, if you haven't used Springer Precision, they are a really great shop to work with. They ship out very fast, and they actually do a lot of customization too. So, great example of that. For a couple of bucks, you can have either numbering lasered into your base pads before they ship out. You can have your name. You can have logos put on them. I just actually went for numbering just so I can keep track of which magazine is which. So if one starts giving me a problem, I know it's number 1 or number 2 or whatever, instead of having to guess which magazine it was. That just helps me as well with magazine rotation and knowing where I'm starting, etc., etc. All right, so take a look at these guys. All right, here's my new number 1. You notice it does have little set screw that's in there. And the purpose of the set screw, that's right down here, is just going to be to keep the base plate on so it doesn't slide off or do anything else while you're, obviously while you're running competitions or whatever else you're doing with this. That's going to be especially important with these little guys where they don't have very much lip on the far side. Now if you're doing like the, like let's say one of these Springer Precision 170 millimeter extensions is the plus 10 extension, you know, you have a little more spring that's in there, so it's going to be hard for that to just fall off. At the same time, you still want to, you know, put in that set screw to make sure that it's solid, doesn't go anywhere, doesn't introduce any sort of feed problems or reliability issues. So you do have to modify the magazines just ever so slightly to get that set screw in, to get it past the feed, the lips on the bottom of the magazine. So what I'm going to do, start off with here, I'm just going to back this guy out a little bit so that we're flush and so the magazine should be able to go on. We'll take this magazine with this nice stock base pad on it. Take whatever tool you got, just pop that off. Shouldn't need that factory spring follower anymore. Okay, and ideally, I'll just slide right on, and hey, just, you know, we're not quite there yet. It's looking like we're still going to be within that gauge space once we get the follower on, but we'll check again once we have everything back together, and we'll see how many rounds we actually get out of this 21 round magazine once the other spring kit and follower are put on there. All right, looking at this, it looks like it's actually, I'm just going to get a better light on here. It's not going to cooperate as far as light goes. We're not that far away actually from having this work. It doesn't look like it does need just a tiny hair of material removed, and I can verify that. But if it does, it's not going to be very much at all. Yeah, it's not quite enough to clear, but it's, there you go. That's a good view. It's really close actually right now. So let's go ahead and see if we can remove a little bit of material and get these things working together. I'm just going to mark it. It's really just, I don't even hardly need to mark it. It's just going to be right on the edge right there is what I'm going to want to remove. And you can use a Dremel or whatever you have. For the other magazines, I like to use this nice little miniature rat tail file that I got from, I think it's probably Lowe's, you know, a little kit. Let's just see if we can remove a little bit of material without scratching this thing too badly. Or since I'm not going in the middle, maybe I'll just shortcut and just Dremel it and call it a day. All right, so let's check, because guess what? It is always easier to remove more material than it is to add back on. That is it. It is locked on there right now. So that's all it takes to modify that. Just barely, I hit that lip, and it's plenty actually to lock down. So if I had to go back to another base pad, that would not be an issue at all. All right, so now let's give Mr. Grams, and the Gram springs, of course, Springer Precision sells those. You don't have to get them. This should work with the factory follower and spring, and I'll try that later and see how many rounds I get with that. but I'm kind of pushing for the maximum capacity. So let's see what we get, and then we'll see if we lock back and everything. All right. Press the sucker down. And there it goes. Just like that. Let's lock it in. All right, that is solid on there now. Not doing anything else. We should, there you go, we're locking back. And when you have 2 rounds in, go and put 2 in, we want to make sure that we are not going to lock back on the second to the last round, but that we do lock back on when it's empty, of course. So there's 1 dummy round in the chamber. That's a second round. That's also a dummy round in the chamber. All right, so that looks positive so far. It did not lock back on the round prior to that. And now let's just see. So I'm going to leave this snap cap in the chamber. We'll try to adjust something out here. All right. So we have snap cap in the chamber. Let's just see how many other rounds we get in here. Here's my reject pile. No powder, no primers. I just use for weight in the magazines. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, by the way, when you look at the holes now, using the Grams spring kits, you're actually going to be 1 hole off as far as the numbering goes. So I just put 5 in. Number 6, there's the 5 hole. So just keep in mind if you're counting up to, so when you see 21, that should be 22 in there. So there's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, again, should be no hole there, 18, we'll see the hole, there it is, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22, see one in the hole, 22, and we get 23, actually 23, 23 are still, you can still press it down. So that's something you have to watch for. In some magazines, if you're using, if it'll fit 23, like if you can cram 23 in there, that's great. Maybe you can start with that. If you have an empty chamber start, you'd have to check and make sure that that pressure from the top round pushing up on the slide isn't enough to slow the slide down if you're trying to fire, let's say with 1 in the chamber and then with this magazine all the way up. And also a lot of times with the other 23 round magazines I'd be using, I would actually pull 1 round off the top if I was going to reload to that. So if I knew I was going to probably have a full chamber, I'd reload the 22 just to make sure that I had a lot of spring tension to make it easier for me to shove it into the gun. Let's just see if it'll do 24. You know what? I'm not getting 24. I might be able to if I had a loader, frankly. But actually, I'm happy with this because it should. Okay, there you go. Without a lot of effort, I was able to lock it in there. So having a reloadable 23 is going to be very, very nice. All right, and the other thing I want to check is as I'm pulling it back, remember I have that spring weight of 23 push up on the top. It actually was not bad. Really not bad at all. There's my dummy round. We'll eject the rest of these through. So now we should have 22 in the magazine, 23 in the gun. Let's just get rid of them. And lock back on empty there. That's exactly what we want to see. And let's go ahead and verify now. Back with the gauge, which is also a Springer Precision gauge. They're big supporters of Team SIG and done a lot to push the platform. This actually fits in the gauge better than what it did with the factory base pad. If you look with the factory base pad, I'll show you. It was actually right at the top. There's just a little gap. I don't know if I can get it right, but right at the top there's just a little gap. It looks like it's actually maybe just, yeah. It's just slightly shorter with the Springer extension. Let's see. Get them even so you can see. Slightly shorter with the Springer extension, even though I now have 2 extra rounds, including those Grams followers. So it's going to fit in slightly better than the factory rounds would. It has a little, just not really any wiggle room, but it fits perfectly. This one, factory, I actually probably shaved just a little bit off of the bottom of the base pad here if I was planning on using it in a major match where they're going to gauge it, just to make sure it didn't have any issues. So one last thing I'm going to check. I want to see with the factory spring what I get, if I can get this base pad off now. If you have no interest in using the factory spring still, then whatever. You can turn it off and find some cool cat videos or something. Let's just see here what we can do. Might be a little bit trickier to get these off than it has been, because they're kind of at the bottom of the mag versus the middle. But let's see. There we go. All right, back with the factory. If you're going to use the factory magazines, you would not need this little guy down here. Let's put that off. Factory spring's going in. And base pad's going back on. Oop. All right, I'm not going to lock it back down because I'm going to take this off as soon as I get done with this video. Let's check that capacity again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, should see 21 rounds there, 22, and that's it. So if you want that 23rd round, you got to get the other spring. So anyway, really cool options, and thanks to Springer Precision for making these available to anybody who has P320, who does gun games. This is going to be my new standard for 3-gun. It's going to be these magazines with Springer Precision extensions for a reloadable 23 rounds that locks back on empty.